Hello, everyone.
Hi.
A group of teachers had gathered for a dual-purpose meeting. One purpose of the meeting was to approve the finished senior projects for high schoolers that were preparing to graduate. The other purpose was to approve new curriculum items for their school. The chairperson of the board had an educational software game up on the overhead that she was playing with, and finally one of the teachers spoke up. "So is this one of the games we're going to be purchasing for the school?" "No," said the chairperson, "this is one of the senior projects." "One of our students did this?" The teachers were astonished. The student in question was not your average high school senior. 4 years prior, he had suffered a traumatic brain injury when he had fallen down a staircase, and had gone from a 4.0 sophomore at college level reading to struggling with kindergarten level material. Doctors had told him to give up any hope of ever making it to college, but undeterred, he had walked through the recovery process. And through that, he happened to discover that he rather enjoyed programming, and had made this educational software game as his senior project. That student was me. My teacher called me after the meeting to relay what had happened. Today I want to talk to you about how the programming community is made up of many diverse individuals. And as such, social skills are very important to a student's success in the computer science industry. I'll share with you about my unusual entry into the wilds of programming, the array of strange personalities I've encountered, and how I maintain a connection to the real world and the people in it. See, knowledge of computers is only half of the picture when it comes to computer science. The other half is the soft skills, the social, interpersonal, and communication skills unique to a particular field. It's best to learn these from the outset, as opposed to the hard way like I did. Now, I know quite a bit about the subject because I am the CEO and founder of Mousepaw Games, an educational software company. But I have also pulled heavily from observations made by other programmers, including A New Hacker's Dictionary by Eric S. Raymond, Dreaming in Code by Scott Rosenberg, and articles by Jeff Atwood, a respected programmer and the co-founder of Stack Overflow, one of the leading online programmers communities. Now, I do want to start off with a disclaimer. I believe in the adage that humor is a gentle way to acknowledge human frailty. And frankly, laughter is a whole lot more fun than getting mad at a frustrating situation. But I make no joke I would not repeat to my colleagues, especially because I've caught myself doing a lot of this funny stuff. So let's get started on how I entered into the programming field. My first experience with programming was at age 14 when I tried to learn the language Python by reading the user manual. I don't recommend this method. After 2 hours of complete confusion, I finally gave up and concluded that programming was for people with master's degrees in computer science who knew trigonometry and calculus and all the higher math. It wasn't until 2010, 2 years after my head injury, that I decided to look into making educational software, a long-time dream. But I did not think I could program. So I tried a piece of software that promised to let me do that without having to know anything about computer science. It didn't do what I wanted it to do. So I found another program. This one required a scripting language, a very simple, basic programming language, and I figured, hey, you don't need a degree to figure this one out. This program also didn't do what I wanted it to do, but I inadvertently learned the basics of computer science. More confident now, I moved on to a fully featured language. And over the next few years, I moved from one language to the next, pushing each as far as it would go, and then finding another one. I discovered that many programmers actually don't have master's degrees in computer science. Some don't have any degrees at all. And while it's very useful in certain jobs, it's not actually a requirement to enter the field cold. I also discovered that a lot of programming involves basic applied algebra, equivalent to higher middle school level math, not the calculus and trigonometry I was imagining. I learned that the best programmers are the ones who are willing to take risks, to try things that might not work. Those that don't risk becoming yet another programmer, making yet another software all their lives. This is a real phrase in the programming industry, according to Eric S. Raymond. Yet another refers to something that is confessedly unoriginal. I also learned that good programmers can come from anywhere. I had the privilege of mentoring a couple young men in programming a few years ago. One of them was a 10-year-old with ADHD, distracted very easily, and yet after 10 minutes of explaining the basics of computer science, he got it, and he started writing code. Another boy, 12-year-old, who was bored with all of his school subjects, hated math with all of his heart. Spent a couple afternoons with me working on computer science, and next time I saw him, he announced that he had made a game on his TI-83 graphing calculator. And if I can do it, someone with a traumatic brain injury, I would submit that anyone can do it. Some of the most brilliant programmers out there today, in fact, are ones with various social impairments such as autism and Asperger's, because their brains are specifically tuned to understand intricacies of computer logic that we can only hope to figure out. You never really know who might take to programming. And as teachers, you have the power to introduce to your students in the classroom a world that they might never otherwise explore. Programming is more an art form than anything. It gives students the opportunity to get their hands on the situation and find their own solution to a problem. But as I said, there's many diverse individuals in the programming realm. And as such, standard rules of communication do not necessarily apply. Really wish someone had warned me. I could have used a field guide as I entered into this realm of programming. There wasn't one available. So I wrote one. Which doesn't want to show up. A field guide to common nerds. See, it's very hard for a greenhorn to get any respect in the programming industry. This is true whether or not they have a degree. Because more experienced programmers really have no interest in, time for, or respect for beginners. I found the easiest way to survive is to hide my inexperience. And the easiest way to do that is to know how to interact. Now, this is my personal cataloging effort, but I'm not the first to make these observations. Eric Raymond once said that programmers generally aren't much like other people. They tend towards self-absorption, intellectual arrogance, and impatience with time and people and tasks that they perceive to be wasting their time. You're going to start to see these personalities actually forming in your classroom as you begin teaching programming, but you have the opportunity to steer your students in the right direction. The first species you're likely to encounter is one I call Programmaticus nubiflamerus. This species feeds on inexperienced programmers, loves to attack anyone who knows less about programming than they do. It will do so by tearing down the victim's intelligence, their abilities, their professional status, their project's viability. They show no mercy. And they do all this while avoiding any semblance of answering the question that was asked. When a young explorer encounters this species, first of all, they should keep still. In a word, keep their mouths shut. They should wait for a more experienced programmer to come along and defend them. And they need to avoid looking like this species' most common prey. Programmaticus no Googleus. This is the quintessential lazy programmer. It's considered to be parasitic and invasive in the programming world, primarily because it asks questions to avoid doing any research of its own, if possibly even preventing having to write any code of its own at all. The most common violations against the species are RTD, or RTFD, read the documentation, this according to Eric Raymond. When a programmer is getting ready to ask a question, they should first see if they can find the answer in the programming language's user manual. There's a lot of good information there. Let me Google that for you. Fairly new term that is a semi-polite way of saying, seriously, you couldn't look that up yourself? A programmer should spend at least 15 minutes doing some research online, trying to find the answer themselves. There's a lot of common questions that have already been answered. What have you tried? This according to speaker and programmer Matt Gemmell. Programmers should try and find the solution themselves, experimenting with their code, trying things out. And then when they ask the question, detailing everything that they've done and what the results were. Now you may be thinking right now that this realm of programming is brutal, it's elitist, anti-beginner, cruel, and you're right, it really is. But it's the beginners, the greenhorns, that have it in their power to change this because they are the experts of tomorrow. The species you want to find, and when you become more experienced, hopefully become, is Programmaticus mentorius. This species really enjoys helping others, especially those with less experience. It has a symbiotic relationship with helping. And it's capable of defending itself and others. It's very well armored. Few will bother attacking it, because doing so will generally cause the gentler part of the population to rise as one and beat the attacker senseless. But there are certain rules of etiquette that a young programmer should follow if the species comes to their aid. First of all, they should respect their time and experience. The P. mentorius is not obligated to help them. They should show appreciation with a simple and genuine thank you. And they need to avoid the common rookie mistake of thinking that the species is their new personal best friend. They need to keep them at a professional distance. As a programmer becomes more experienced, they should look for opportunities to return the favor, maybe answer some of the questions of the person that has helped them in the past. Now, another species that loves to help. You don't want help from this one. Programmaticus takeovericus. This is the master of the long-distance takeover. In one run-in I had with this species, I was asking how to put the objects that the player could click on and move around on top of the animated video my animator had sent me. It's pretty common for games. I asked the question and received the following response. Why would you want to put the objects on top of the video? That's just going to look confusing. I explained what I was doing, but that didn't deter him. He went on to tell me I was using the wrong language, the wrong approach, the wrong method, the wrong style. But I let him talk because there's really no point arguing with him. This species will try and take over other people's projects. They don't care how far away they are or how little they know about it. They primarily want others to adopt their personal methods without regard to the actual needs of the project and the individual. The easiest way to defend oneself against this species is ask the attacker to explain his approach. This may seem counterproductive, but a clever young explorer can use an attack to their advantage in that they can gain a lot of really good information, even if it doesn't apply to the current situation. And they should consider whether the approach is actually viable for their projects. There is a rare occasion on which this species is actually correct. Either way, don't attack them. The young programmer should thank them for their time. And then if it doesn't work, consider explaining why it doesn't work for their project. And then ignore anything else the P. takeovericus has to say in the interest of time and sanity. Now, as scary as an attack from this species might seem, it's not nearly as scary as its cousin, Programmaticus militaricus. See, in every programming language, there's something known as best practice. This is a set of style rules and techniques that are commonly used by programmers for that language in order to promote more understanding of the code, make it easier to work. But these are not set in stone. Every project has different needs, and sometimes best practice just does not work. Of course, that said, every programmer should have a solid style that they stick to. There's really no excuse for hitting this technique. That said, the species that believes that best practice is martial law, and they're the marshal, is this one. They attack in its manner very similar to Programmaticus nubiflamerus. Except they are kind of the chihuahuas of the programming world. They'll take on people much larger and more experienced than they are. The easiest way to fight back is to politely ask the attacker to detail an alternative approach. See, this is the difference between Militaricus and Takedovericus, is that this species doesn't have an alternative in mind. They simply want their personal style adopted. If they can't detail an approach, it's definitely a Militaricus, and one should ignore everything they have to say. They have nothing to contribute to the project. And as usual, don't attack them. Wait for a more experienced programmer to come along and help out. Thankfully, not all species are actually dangerous. Meet Programmaticus noreticus. It's either trying to be helpful or funny, one of the two. Rarely succeeds at either, because it responds without fully reading what was said. I had a run-in with this species a few months ago in which I was asking how to accomplish a particular task in a programming language called SQL. I received the following response, word for word, and I quote, "You use SQL." No, I thought I was going to be using Pig Latin. I didn't actually say that because, as usual, don't attack them. I let them talk. Now, every programmer, as they grow and mature in the field, will become one or a combination of these species. So here's a few things to keep in mind. One, a programmer should never forget their humble beginnings, like many a P-newbie flamerist has. They should respect others' boundaries. Let them make their own discoveries and mistakes, unlike P. Takedovericus allows for. They should hold their best practices with humility, unlike P. Militaricus. And they should be independent, take risks, try things that might not work. As far as I'm concerned, if I try to do something that's said to be impossible and I fail, and those same people come back and say, "We told you it was impossible," I can say, "Yeah, but I had fun doing it." Finally, a programmer should give back to the community, preferably by reading the question before responding, which is how they become the best species of all, P. mentorius. There's a lot of stuff there to keep in mind about all the strange programmers in the field, and it's very easy to get wrapped up in this world of programming. Raise your hand if you have ever used a piece of software and thought, "This is needlessly complicated." How many have received technical advice that you didn't understand a single word of? Both of these are resulting from a condition I like to call nerditis, an inflammation of one's technical abilities to the detriment of all else. In a word, the sufferer has forgot common English, resulting in unexplainable programs and explanations. The hostile species are especially prone to this because, again, they really don't have much respect for newbies. And programmers in general kind of have a bit of a disdain for non-technically minded people, prompting phrases like "picnic error," "problem in chair, not in computer." Even the P. mentorius is at risk. They're more than happy to help, but darn it, they just can't figure out how to say it in English. To prevent this condition, programmers should use analogies. As teachers, I really recommend using real-world analogies in your classroom because those are the same analogies that your students will be using down the road to explain those same concepts to other people. Programmers should have non-technical activities, non-programmer friends, if that's even possible in today's society. Get away from the computer. Do something fun that has nothing to do with programming. They should remember their beginnings and avoid the inflated ego of thinking, "I'm a programmer, I know everything." Our safari has reached its end, so I want to take a moment to wrap up and recap. A student's success in the programming industry depends largely upon their social skills, partly because you never know who might take to programming. It's a diverse field. There's a lot of strange personalities a programmer must learn to deal with while maintaining a connection to the real world and the people in it. I guess it can be summarized like this. Take risks, be adventurous, and never take yourself too seriously. This has never hit home for me more than a few months ago when I had a little bit of a problem with the game I was making. See, the file that the player's settings and scores was saved in was at a high risk of becoming damaged, losing their data. I thought of a possible solution, a way to recreate that file by guessing the combinations until one matched. So I decided to do a little bit of math, figure out if this was even feasible. Used another program that I had built to find out how many combinations I'd be looking at for a little section. 20 minutes later, the calculations are still running, and I'm beginning to wonder how much longer this is going to take. So I pull out my trusty TI-83 calculator and discover to mathematical certainty it will be finished on June 26, 3598 at 8:42 a.m. Which means to calculate a single activity's worth of data would take 30,000 millennia. I double-checked my math. I came to a logical conclusion. This is not a viable piece of software. Thank you very much for your time. Is there any questions I can answer?
Very good. Yeah.